A tale of two men embittered by a harsh trial. To harshly critique a beloved game in front of its ravenous fan base.
Screwed it up. Man.
What are you doing?
You know, I'm doing a piano intro like how you did.
It's not a piano, it's cardboard.
Well, I'm just sorry that my ability to make beautiful music using cardboard makes you jealous.
Oh, for f***'s sake. Let's just continue the review.
Okay, fine. Folks, we're just going to jump into a part 2 of Final Fantasy X. For part 1, check in the link in the description below or in the linked comment, because part 1's on the Ranting Spiderman's channel. So with that, roll my logo. Unlike Final Fantasy XIII, Final Fantasy X has a fair amount of side quests and minigames to help break up the monotony of just going forward.
This is a nice gesture, but it doesn't work for me for one big reason. These are some of the worst side activities in any Final Fantasy game. Like, oh my god, I hate almost every single one. The first and most apparent one is Blitzball. I absolutely despise Blitzball. This is just awful. So you can avoid Blitzball for the majority of the game, but there is one point in the story where you are basically forced to play it, and it's bullshit. If you thought Blitzball would be a fast-paced game of skill like soccer or basketball or football, then you are wrong. It's basically a mini RPG inside of another RPG. First of all, you can only go left and right despite being in a sphere. This is already dumb because it just makes the game feel like it may as well be on a regular flat field. Why do this in a sphere of water if you can't go up or down?
Your players have a set standard of stats like blocking, passing, attacking, health, and endurance. By default, movement is automatic, but you can set it to manual mode. But doing this will cause endless headaches because camera angle changes in Blitzball are absolutely horrendous. And trying to swim to the other side manually will just cause so much frustration. When you get stopped by an enemy team member, a window will pop up showing your stat matchup, and you'll have to determine your course of action like passing, taking the hit, or shooting.
But here's my major problem with Blitzball. Even if your stats are better than your enemies, there's still a chance the enemy can win because there is a randomizer applied. Why is this a thing? This means even if you plan everything out and have a matchup that works in your favor, you can still lose because the game feels like telling you to go fuck yourself. Another thing that baffles me is that the only mandatory Blitzball match in the entire game is one of the most unfair matchups imaginable. The Luca goers are way better than your team, and you're almost guaranteed to lose on your first playthrough. Why would I want to keep playing Blitzball when the first matchup is one I'm ridiculously unprepared for? Also, there were a bunch of times during this particular match where I was about to score a goal, but then the clock either ran out or a cutscene would happen and ruin my shot. This happened 4 times, and when I finally bust my ass and win, my reward is just spheres that I get from enemies all over the world. It was not worth the effort in any way. This is the only time that Blitzball is mandatory, and thank God. I hate it so damn much.
On top of that, the game only gives you a basic rundown of the rules and mechanics. But if you actually want to learn to play more and actually get good at it, you have to read the 11-chapter rulebook in this game. 11. And these aren't small sections. It's a time commitment for a minigame that isn't really worth playing at all.
Exactly! You aren't missing out on anything. Even the music in Blitzball is awful. If you like it, I will never understand why. This was one of the worst things. But since it's only mandatory once, I can't be too mad. I just wish that Blitzball was good, given how involved it is with the world of Spira. Then there is the lightning dodging minigame in the Thunder Plains where you can get rewards for dodging the lightning a certain number of times. If you dodge the lightning 100 times, you get 3 health spheres. Isn't that worth running back and forth like a jackass? No part of this is fun. Every part of it is tedious, and the only reward that's worth a damn is the one for Lulu's celestial weapon. And you only have to dodge the lightning 200 times for that. Isn't this fun, kids? And don't expect the game to offer you a counter for how many bolts you've already dodged. You don't get one, and the number resets the second you leave the Thunder Plains.
Man, aren't random arbitrary menial tasks fun? Isn't it better than or equal to chores?
Then there's the motherfucking butterfly catching, which is just obnoxious. The rewards suck and you can accidentally trigger it easily, resulting in you being warped back to the beginning of the area when the timer runs out.
I honestly opted out of this immediately because I could see the tedium on the horizon.
When you get the airship, there's the Dark Aeon battles where you get to fight super buff versions of your Aeons, but they are not worth the effort it takes to beat them. There is little to no reward unless you just want a challenge, which is fine for those who want it, but I just didn't care. The regular Aeon challenges though I thought were fine and a good way to test your skills with them.
Yeah, they were like fun little summoner Pokemon battles to prove that you could be the very best summoner there ever was.
I'm sorry. I'll just get in the corner now. I thought it was funny. Stupid.
Back to the mini games. There's the Omega Ruins where you can battle powerful enemies for some rewards, and this place was fine. Sure, it's difficult, but that's kind of the point. Then there's the Chocobo riding game, which... do I even need to say how bad this is?
No, you don't.
The Monster Arena is probably the most expansive side quest, and I wasn't into it. You have to capture monsters all around Spira, and if you manage to collect enough of each monster, you'll unlock a more powerful version of them that you can battle for rare item drops. This concept is okay, but it's way too long and it's not worth all the hours of gameplay needed. Plus, all the perks of the Monster Arena are never really explained to the player, so it just seems even more frivolous.
It just equates to more grinding for monsters to grind for items so you can grind for spheres or item components. I know JRPGs can be a grind fest, but come on.
All of the side activities in Final Fantasy X are either far too long or incredibly tedious, and none of them are worth the rewards you get. Maybe this is why I hated the overall linearity of the game so much. I'm sure other people used these side activities as a means to break the monotony of just constantly walking forward from the main game, so they didn't mind the hallways. But because I hated the mini-games and didn't find the side quests interesting, I only ever really wanted to move forward and continue the story so the game would just end. Again, it's not as bad as 13 because you can at least escape 10's hallway for a moment with Blitzball or do something other than just battle, but that's a low bar and I still can't be bothered to do anything other than combat.
And that's not even counting the grinding you may need to do to get spheres to level your characters. We'll get to spheres later. But this need for spheres causes you to run in literal circles on occasion to force encounters from monsters. Fun!
Okay, look. For all my complaints, I can safely say that Final Fantasy X has one of the absolute best combat systems in the entire series. I love it. Each of your characters has specific roles they bring to combat.
Tidus is average strength but a fast melee fighter. Wakka is able to melee hit flying enemies with high accuracy and impose status effects. Auron is slow but strong and can penetrate through tough armored foes. Lulu casts black magic and Yuna casts white magic and is able to summon Aeons as well. Riku can use throwing items and instantly take apart mechanical foes. And Kimahri uses a mix of magical and physical attacks while also being able to learn enemy moves. The characters also have the overdrives much like Final Fantasy VII's limit break system.
Now if the combat just stopped there, it would seem like any other early Final Fantasy game, but here's what really sets 10 apart from the others. You can actually swap out your party members during combat. This is a fantastic mechanic because with the variety of enemies in the game, you are pretty much encouraged to use everyone. Doing this not only gives each character a moment to shine, but it also helps keep your party members evenly leveled throughout the duration of your playthrough. I love that everyone is relatively useful. Let's face it, no one was using Gao, no one's main was Kate Sith, nobody loved Amaret. It was easy to let other party members collect dust in previous entries. In 10, everyone matters, and all this is done at a nice quick pace so I never feel like battles are dragging on too long. Another nicety is this gauge in the top right that lets you know what order you and your enemies will attack in. Add to this some great battle music and 10 really shines in this department. The only complaints I have regarding the combat are minor. For one, Kimahri doesn't really excel at anything, so I didn't see a need to use him as much as the others. He was just okay at everything. Also, Riku's physical attacks are pathetically underpowered. I know that her main focus is to steal and throw things, but she's still too weak in my opinion. Speaking of weak attacks, why is Lulu's first option her physical attack? When would you ever use it? And why does she use dolls? Wouldn't it make more sense to use a spellbook? What monster is going to be afraid of this big-titted goth chick holding a Hello Kitty plushie? Also, this game maintains the random encounters from the previous entries, and this is definitely an instance where I feel the encounter rate is too high, especially in long areas with branching paths.
So when you're low on health and healing items in a large area, you'll be creeping along just hoping and praying you don't encounter something.
Please, no encounters, please. It's gonna make it to the other side, man. Come on. No encounters, man. No encounters.
Your party's equipment can also be enhanced with passive abilities, some of which come with the item and others you can assign to the item later.
I like that it makes all your weapons feel like they serve a purpose, even hours after you get them, but it can be easy to have a clogged up list of them. Thankfully, each character's equipment is separate from the rest of your party, so it's not too bad.
Though certain aspects of combat can be an issue when the game fails to fully explain them. The game will tell you that some enemies require piercing damage to do significant amounts of damage, but also doesn't tell you which monsters these are. To know that information, you need to have either Kamari cast Scan or have a piece of equipment with the Scan ability attached to it. But unlike other RPGs, you don't get to retain this information after scanning them. So if you forget their weaknesses, you have to wash, rinse, and repeat. This goes for enemies weak against certain types of elements and status effects. But one nice touch they added is, if you attack with a character that cannot deal significant damage, a character that can will speak up and tell you to leave it to them.
Another thing we need to bring up is the use of Yuna's Aeons. When you summon an Aeon, it replaces the rest of your party and you can control it like any other party member. At first, this seems really cool, but the Aeons wear out their usefulness relatively quickly, and by the end of the game, they are almost completely ineffective. You can upgrade your Aeon stats and teach them new moves with items too, but with what happens with Aeons at the end of the game, this too is rendered entirely meaningless.
At most, they're only useful to spam their overdrives on certain bosses.
Now when it comes to character leveling, Final Fantasy X was the first in the series to do away with traditional leveling up and introduced the Sphere Grid, a board that you use to manually level up your character stats.
Here's how it works. After every combat, you earn AP. When the AP reaches a certain threshold, you'll be able to earn the ability to move a space on the sphere grid. The grid can be accessed by the menu. Each character starts at a certain point on the grid, and by moving across it using the spheres dropped by enemies, they activate nodes, which will allow your characters to learn new abilities and earn stat boosts.
For the most part, I don't like the Sphere Grid. It suffers from the same problem that the overworld does. It takes way too long to open up and be worth a damn. For the majority of the game, the leveling process might as well be automatic since there are only a certain number of paths your characters will be able to progress through, since some paths are intentionally blocked off until later in the game. It's not as bad or linear as the Crystarium in Final Fantasy XIII, but it's way more intrusive. The stat buffs you receive from activating the nodes actually make a noticeable difference in your characters, so you'll often find yourself pausing the game to boost their stats. It brings the game to a halt way too often. I think it would have been better to use this just for character abilities and have the actual stat bonuses come automatically.
Toward the end of the game, however, you're given more freedom to roam around the grid and teach characters' abilities outside their own class.
You can teach Yuna black magic and instantly make her overpowered. With enough time and patience, you could actually teach every character every move. This is a popular fan challenge, but even with some of the quicker ways to do it, I couldn't be bothered to try it myself. Towards the end of the game, I enjoyed the Sphere Grid, but for the mass majority of it, I found it to be an interesting but overly intrusive mechanic that compounds on a larger issue I have with Final Fantasy X in general. But with that said, the combat system really is the best thing in Final Fantasy X and is probably the last really great combat system in the main series. I would not be opposed to this character swapping mechanic making a return in later installments. I really loved it. The biggest problem I have with Final Fantasy X is the pacing. This is genuinely one of the worst paced RPGs I have ever played. So much of this game feels like it's stretched longer than it needs to be. A minor issue is the unskippable cutscenes. These are just more annoying than anything else, but the high encounter rate, the overly long side activities, the constantly going back and forth with the sphere grid, and the fact that several story elements are shoved in for padding, it all just compounds into a game that wastes your time far more than it needs to. The biggest waste of time is the Cloistro Trials. These are block pushing puzzles that your party has to solve for a unit to unlock a new Aeon, and these just bring the game to a screeching halt. They are far too sluggish and are more tedious than they are difficult. And just like Blitzball, there's mindless repetitive music that just drones on and on and on, and I just feel trapped. And because the game takes so long to open up, I'm not as interested in the side activities as I should be because I've been held back from the full experience for so long. This is a small section, but the issue was large enough that I felt that it needed to be addressed on its own, and it really affected my overall enjoyment of the game.
This is the first Final Fantasy game to feature music done by someone other than the series composer Nobuo Uematsu. Uematsu felt burned out after making soundtracks for the last 9 entries, and who could blame him? It had to be tough delivering that amount of high-quality music for so long.
So for Final Fantasy X, he sought help from Masashi Hamauzo and Junya Nakano. Hamauzo would later go on to create music for Dirge of Cerberus, and Nakano would go on to create music for Final Fantasy IV's remake. These guys were brought on to bring new life into the soundtrack and create scores that Uematsu himself couldn't. It's pretty obvious that a lot of the music in this game was not done by Uematsu himself. There's a lot of simple piano melodies that lack Uematsu's signature melodic style. Many of them take a more lighthearted ambient tone, which I like. There's also an extensive use of church hymns, which makes sense given the religious nature of this game. Sometimes I wish there was a bit more variety in them, but I don't think they were bad. Yuna's sending cutscene uses these masterfully and creates a powerhouse moment. I think the soundtrack is really good and actually does a lot to complement the look and feel of the game. I think most of the tracks I like were done by Uematsu, like the battle theme. It kicks ass. It sounds triumphant and exciting. Hamauzu's usage of catchy piano melodies was a welcomed addition here. Unlike his overly pretentious 13 music, a lot of his tracks here are lighthearted and catchy. I love the Besaid Island theme. It sounds like something out of Wii Sports. It's so peaceful and inviting. I think that this change in the traditional style of music accentuates the new direction of the series rather well. But there are some tracks that just feel out of place. The Blitzball music does not fit the overly slow pace of the game at all. And Otherworld just feels like it was taken from a Gears of War game.
Okay, Taylor, I'm gonna let you finish, but secretly, I love the Otherworld song. It doesn't match the game at all, but it definitely resonates with my emo side.
Nakano's use of slow dragging strings, which was prevalent in 13, is in 10 as well. I didn't like it there, and I don't like it here. The tracks just sound empty and feel like they are droning on and on. Out of the 3 of them, I feel like Nakano was the weak link. His in particular were the tracks that I liked the least. I didn't think most of them were really that bad, but they were just bland and forgettable. You can definitely see that Uematsu was lacking inspiration in some aspects of the soundtrack though. There were a few that I was shocked to find out that he did because they didn't have the same audio quality I was used to. The character themes in particular I found to be surprisingly underwhelming. But in this game, when Uematsu gets it right, he gets it really right. My favorite track in this game is easily A Fleeting Dream. It's so simple, but the melodic feel, the use of strings, and the excellent blend of both Uematsu and Hamauzu's style creates a wonderful bit of ear candy that, while not as impactful as some of the other tracks, still carries a real emotional weight without any vocals. It's perfect. Like Final Fantasy VIII, 10 has a song with actual lyrics. The track Isn't It Wonderful features excellent composition and beautiful vocals from Ritsuki Nakano. This is just a fantastic and emotionally powerful song. I love it. So I guess when you break it down, I enjoyed 2/3 of the soundtrack. Like I said, most of the tracks I liked were done by Uematsu and Hamauzu, while many of the ones that I didn't like were done by Nakano. It would be unfair to say that all of his tracks were bad and that everyone else involved was perfect, but his tunes didn't captivate me nearly as much. For better or worse, Final Fantasy X's soundtrack breathes new life into the series that I feel was a welcome change of pace. And while this caliber of music certainly didn't carry over in some of the later games, its quality here cannot be denied. So it's time to go over the spoiler parts of the story. As per usual, we're not going into massive detail on everything, we're just going to talk about the parts we feel like talking about. The whole part where Yuna gets kidnapped by the Al Bhed Blitzball team seemed a little pointless. It was kind of just there to pad out the game time. Plus, Yuna can summon powerful monsters. How did they just grab her?
Ah, we got you!
Would you like to meet my puppy?
What? Oh dear God!
The revelation that Sin is actually Jecht is a cool twist, and the music here adds to the sadness of the situation, but this might have worked better if Tidus actually liked his father, or if their relationship was more complex. Like, what if Jecht was only an asshole to Tidus when he was drunk, but was a good dad when he wasn't? Then it would introduce a whole new set of different emotions for both the player and Tidus to deal with. Also, can the fans of this game stop defending this scene?
Shut the fuck up! Shut the fuck up! Shut the fuck up! Shut the fuck up!
Oh, but it's supposed to be annoying and awkward. Great. Yeah, it is. You can do that without being this bad. I can actually see how this scene was probably a charming moment on paper, but the execution is unbearable. I think the thing I hate the most about this scene is that it ruins Yuna's theme. Her theme is pretty nice, but every time I hear it, I'm just reminded of this annoying moment.
This isn't just the English version either. Even the Japanese version is bad.
Oh fuck, that one is somehow even worse.
So the gang runs into Operation Mihen, a strike force led by Seymour where Crusaders, Knights, and Al Bhed team up using Forbidden Machina to attack Sin.
I don't get what the plan here is. Isn't it obvious that Sin is strong enough to withstand an assault like this? Also, how has no one questioned the teachings of Yevon when it comes to the use of Machina? The failure of Operation Mihen is actually a pretty heartbreaking scene and adds to the feeling of powerlessness that the group has against Sin, but the scene that follows it is just ridiculous. Hundreds of people just died in front of them and they just cheerfully go on their way laughing and smiling? How about you cut the shit and get on with the pilgrimage? The group should be vengeful and driven, but they are exactly the same as they were before. In fact, if you cut out all the stuff involving Operation Mihen, I don't think they would even need to change a single line of dialogue. Once Riku joins your party and you get to Guado Salam, the plot just kind of comes to a halt. Really, everything involving Seymour is just boring. He's such a Saturday morning cartoon villain. He might as well be twirling a mustache while petting a cat and laughing maniacally. Seymour tells the group that it takes a strong bond between the summoner and someone else to unlock the final Aeon, so he proposes to Yuna. I know that he just wants to do this because he wants to bang her, but there is no reason for her to agree to it. She knows she doesn't love him, so it would be pointless. Even if you want to argue that she's doing it so she can have him confess that he murdered his own father, that still doesn't change the fact that everyone else in the party knows that it won't help her pilgrimage.
It would make people happy.
Yeah, you know what else will make people happy? Killing Sin, you dumbass!
And what makes it even more pointless is that she didn't have to do it alone. Her friends would have believed her. She even had a recorded confession of his father saying that Seymour was going to kill him.
And the far plane is weird. So when people die, their souls need to be guided to the far plane by a summoner performing a sending ritual, otherwise their souls become fiends. But in some cases, the souls of the dead can maintain their human form if they feel a deep connection towards the living world. If that's the case, they just get back up like they aren't dead. If everyone knows this, then death really shouldn't be that big of a problem. Wouldn't pretty much everyone have a desire to stay alive? Hey guys, if you want to be immortal, all you have to do is want it really, really badly. Step right up. But the far plane is where people can visit the spirits of the dead. Riku offers a scientific explanation that the images of the dead are just the fireflies reacting off of what the spectator is feeling. This could be an interesting way to feed into the clash between the religion and scientific aspects of the world of Spira, but this idea is totally undercut by Seymour's dad coming out of the far plane to warn Yuna about Seymour. So then these really are the souls of the dead. But this plotline with Seymour and his interest in Yuna goes on forever, and it's so boring and one-dimensional. I don't care about this fucking loser. Honestly, all this feels like it's straight from a different game. I'll forgive Yuna not sending Seymour here because the rest of the Guado interrupt her, but this is the only time that I can excuse it. When Sin attacks the group under the ice, it's a simple scene where Jecht conveys his feelings towards his son without words, and it was probably the only time the connection between them resonated with me.
The big twist is that Yuna will die at the end of her pilgrimage. The final Aeon she summons will destroy Sin for 10 years, but will also kill her.
So let me get this straight. We are told early on that Jecht is Sin, but the big reveal towards the end of the game is that Yuna is doomed to die? These plot lines are totally backwards. Wouldn't it be way more compelling if Tidus reluctantly falls in love with a girl he knows is doomed to die? What if Yuna kept coming on to him despite him trying not to give in, but ultimately succumbs to his feelings, only for the tragic twist to be that he is actually the one who dies? And then what if these spheres we find by Jecht slowly reveal to Tidus what happened to his father, and the last sphere is actually a surprise reveal that Jecht became Sin? They could have made it so that Tidus could finally forgive Jecht after seeing these spheres, only to find out that he would actually have to kill his own father just as he started to love him again. I think doing the plot that way really would have made Tidus' story something akin to a Greek tragedy. The Jecht spheres are cool because I like seeing all the things that I wish happened to Tidus happen to Jecht, but it's like I'm watching what could have been. What they do with these plot points is fine, I guess, but man, what they could have had here is just something great. And if I go back to nitpicking, if the summoners are doomed to die, then why is there this sort of competitive attitude amongst them? Donna is always glowing that she is the best summoner and that she will defeat Sin. That's like someone bragging that they cut you in line to the fucking guillotine. Nah, I get to die first, loser. Like, who gives a shit? Just get rid of Sin. Waka is an asshole. He keeps complaining when he finds out that the Church of Yevon is corrupt, which is fine since he's been a devout follower and this totally alters his perception. But when Riku's hometown is destroyed, he's just like,
boom! Like happy festival fireworks, yeah?
jackass. The wedding scene looks cool, but is pretty stupid. How was Yuna planning on sending Seymour during this wedding situation? I don't think he's going to just sit there and watch her do her sending dance.
And where did she even get her staff?
She uses her Aeon to escape the wedding, but then just goes to the Cloister of Trials that the church knows she will go to. And since they know she's going to be there, they catch the entire group and put them on trial for heresy. It's revealed here that the leader of the church is actually an unsent as well, and that they actually embrace the power of death because it makes them immortal, which really enforces the idea of death being kind of pointless in this game.
It's very much in the line of, oh, Seymour is dead, huh? But isn't dead? Well, I need to get rid of you now because I too are indeed dead, but also not dead as well. Kill them.
The church tries to execute the party by throwing them into a pool of water. What? What the fuck is that gonna do? Okay, I guess some people could get tired and drown, but Tidus and Waka can hold their breath for like an hour and a half, so good luck killing them. Also, why bother pushing them into water when you are literally holding guns?
Well, that's a lame way to kill someone.
And what's weird about that scene is that it starts off tense, like they're really going to shoot them and toss them in the water. But no, they just shove them in and are like, yeah, that'll teach ya. You'll die in that water, boy, howdy. Which, sure, they'll drown eventually, but as the party awkwardly swims away, the guards are like, they're so dead. We should put some guards at the exit just in case they don't drown. Why is there an exit? This equates to Bond villain logic, like, die, Titus. Wait, you found the only exit? How? I'll get you next time, Titus. And that's it.
This is really where Seymour shows how lame he is with this hammy dialogue.
I will destroy Spira. I will save it.
And after they beat Seymour, for some reason, Yuna doesn't send him. You have him alone and defeated, and you don't send him? What's wrong with you idiots? The scene where Yuna tries to abandon her pilgrimage is just heartbreaking and gorgeous. She tries to lie to herself that she could live a long, carefree life. She tries to give in to Tidus' optimism, but she can't do it. She falls apart because she can't abandon her goal, even if it ends with her own death. Even if everything is against her, she wants to push on. The two of them finally kiss, and the track Isn't It Wonderful plays as the two of them float through the water with just perfectly crafted visuals. This scene is a visual masterpiece. It totally operates on feelings over logic though. The image of them floating through the water is done for visual spectacle, because if you turn the music off you'll hear, you know, because it's not like Yuna can hold her breath as long as Tidus. Whatever. This is just a well done moment. When the gang gets to Mount Gagazet, they run into this idiot again. Seymour reveals that he killed Alderonso, and this breaks Kimari's heart.
No.
Simply tragic. Yeah, the genocide of the Ronso race is totally glossed over. And guess what happens after they defeat Seymour? Guess what? Yuna still doesn't send him. What the fuck are you waiting for, you stupid bitch? Do you think if you beat him up 100 times you get a free sundae? So here's where we get a big reveal that I honestly find fascinating. So the gang finds a bunch of faith. It's kind of unclear what the faith actually is, but in this instance, they are the souls of people who willingly gave up their lives to defeat sin.
Their souls are sealed in statues in a dreamlike state. Their dreams and power can be made physical by summoners in order to form an Aeon. The faith the group finds is actually having energy drawn from them by someone. Titus touches one of the faith statues and passes out. He wakes up back in his Xanarkand, which is both in one piece and also totally abandoned. When he goes to his old house, he encounters a child of the faith. The child informs Titus that long ago, Xanarkand and Bavel had a war where Bavel destroyed Xanarkand with powerful machina. The surviving summoners of Xanarkand gave up their souls to become faith and summoned a dream recreation of Xanarkand. This means everyone that we saw in Xanarkand in the beginning of the game were actually just a dream. This includes Titus. The faith have grown tired of dreaming but can't rest because someone is drawing power from them. The faith need Titus to defeat sin so they can rest. And when they rest, Titus will cease to exist.
This is actually a brilliant revelation that not only adds a tragic twist to Titus' story, but this is a better way to show how the souls of the dead can't rest. Seymour and Micah are dead but remain in the world of the living because they just want it really bad. But the faith recreated an entire civilization that they lost in life, a dream of a memory that they can't let go of because they are too attached to it and just want to keep it alive, even if it means they can never rest and they had to give up their physical bodies to create it. It's actually a really fascinating backstory. My only issues are: 1, of all the people you could dream, you pick Titus? Really? 2, where is Dream Xanarkand? The real Xanarkand is in ruins, but where is this dream version? I mean, it has to be somewhere in Spira since Sin and Orin can go back and forth between it. I tried to find out, and the only thing I've been able to find is that it's evidently somewhere in the middle of the ocean. In a world with airships, how has no one flown over this glowing technological metropolis and gone, "What the fuck is that?" 3rd, Titus has almost no reaction to learning that he is a dream. He just kind of says, "Oh," and that's it. This would be a perfect time for his internal narration to come in, but it doesn't. There are so many interesting ways they could have had him react to this revelation, but he just doesn't. It's really disappointing. This could have been way better if we just had a better lead, but the tone when the gang finally arrives at Xanarkand is so bittersweet and sorrowful, I love it. So the gang meets Lady Yunalesca, where they learn that in order to get the final Aeon, the summoner would have to sacrifice a guardian with whom they have a special bond with. This guardian would in turn become the next Sin 10 years later. This is what happened to Jecht during Braska's pilgrimage. By this point, I am so sick of Titus constantly bitching that this is his story. It's like he's desperately trying to remind the audience that he's the main character. I got it. Plus it makes him look pretty selfish because he is downplaying the rest of the group.
This is my story.
There's 7 of us!
Anyway, Yunalesca reveals there's no way for the pilgrimage to end the cycle of Sin's rebirth, and we also learn that Orin was killed by Yunalesca and that he's been unsent this whole time.
Wait, if Orin is dead, then how the fuck did he age so much? So the gang pretty much decides that they will find another permanent way to defeat Sin. For some reason, this upsets Lady Yunalesca and she attacks you. Hey JillieFoo, how'd you like this fight?
It sucks.
This is the point where I absolutely lost my patience with this game. I attempted this fight 6 times. Now this wouldn't be a problem if each attempt didn't take upwards of an hour plus. 6 hours of my life gone. Each time I did slightly better, but between her using obscure status elements the game glossed over and has only used once previously, along with 3 forms that not only fully heal themselves, but also increase her max health by 25,000 each time, you better pray you have a ton of ethers for Yuna, Phoenix Downs, healing items, and remedies or holy water. And if Yuna runs out of MP and ethers during the 2nd or 3rd phase, you might as well restart the fight. This is because at this point, Yuna's the only one preventing Yunalesca from healing herself 5,000 to 9,999 HP at a time.
So yeah, I have some pretty bad feelings regarding this fight.
Oh yes, feed me your rage.
I didn't mind the Yunalesca fight that much. It was tough, but I was able to understand her strategy. However, I also sympathize with J-Foo's frustration because this difficulty spike is pretty extreme for this part of the game. Even when you know how to beat her, she's still pretty time consuming. And and if you lose, you have to watch the pre-battle cutscene all over again.
And this isn't even the only boss fight that gets like this. As she dies, Yunalesca reveals that Sin is created by someone called Yu Yevon. The gang leaves the Xanark in ruins to try and figure out another way to defeat Sin.
They head back to Bevelle for ideas. Maester Micah pretty much loses his shit when he finds out the group killed Yunalesca. He also confirms the existence of Yu Yevon. He is the one who turns the final Aeon into Sin. Sin is essentially an armor that Yu Yevon himself lives inside of. That's all Micah says before he pretty much sends himself.
Titus and Yuna sneak away to talk to that faith child and learn that if they defeat Yu Yevon himself, the cycle of Sin will end.
Yu Yevon was a summoner from the real Xanarkin years ago. That's all this kid says though. The fates say that Yu Yevon is neither good nor evil, but I don't know, he seems pretty fucking evil to me. At least Majora's Mask was just a chaotic entity that's backstory was rooted in hexing rituals. The whole Yu Yevon thing is so vague and uninteresting compared to everything else.
The group plans on distracting Sin by getting everyone to sing the Hymn of the Faith, which was Jecht's favorite song in life.
Oh fuck me, that is so stupid. So the group attacks Sin head on with the airship and manage to wound him enough to ground him at Bevelle. That seems a little easy. I mean, I know the cannon is strong and all, but Sin put a mile-long crater in the earth. You'd think it would take a bit more than that. The gang flies the airship inside of Sin and make their way towards Yu Yevon. Inside Sin, they run into... Hello, buddy. Oh, for the love of God. Why are you still here? How did he even get here? After Seymour is defeated, Yuna finally sends him.
Really waited to the last minute on this one.
When they finally run into Jecht, his dialogue with Tidus really leaves a lot to be desired. I know some people think it's more impactful if they say less, but the little dialogue they do have really doesn't convey much emotion for me. Meanwhile, his brief lines with Auron were far more impactful. So Jecht dies, and then you have to destroy all the Aeons you gathered. And when you finally confront Yu Yevon, it is the lamest, most disappointing final boss ever. All he does is heal himself and cast auto life on your party members if you somehow die. It's pathetic. Jecht wasn't that hard of a final boss, but this is just insulting.
When Yu Yevon dies, Auron allows himself to be sent and finally embraces his death. The shell of Sin dissipates in another visually stunning cutscene. Since the faith have now stopped dreaming, Tidus begins to fade away.
God, fuck me. This scene would be so heartbreaking and so beautiful if I gave a single shit about Tidus. Honestly, this scene gets me choked up because of Yuna's loss more than anything else.
After Tidus disappears, the world rejoices, ready to live in a new world without Sin.
Final Fantasy X is really a mixed bag for me. It really goes out on a high note, so much so that I totally understand why people love this. The music is good, all the FMVs are gorgeous, and there are a lot of interesting ideas, plus the combat system is just so fucking good. But all the best things in the game come in way too late. Everything in this game that I really enjoyed came in towards the end. It meanders way too much in the middle. Most of the characters aren't that interesting. The story can be fascinating at times, but way too much of it isn't explained clearly to the point where it's easy to get lost. This was an intentional narrative decision by the developers. They wanted to leave some things vague for discussion amongst fans, but too much detail is left out because of this. I think the thing I hated about this game the most was the world and the pacing. I don't know how anyone could love this game but hate Final Fantasy XIII. Final Fantasy XIII is all 10's fault. The seeds of all 13's problems were planted here. The overly complicated plot, the linear world, the dumb and uninteresting characters, the manual leveling system, it all started here. The difference is that 10 did these elements good enough that the majority of players didn't seem to mind. I did though. I grant you that my indifference to Final Fantasy X is mostly just my problem. This game just poked me personally in all the wrong ways, and unlike 13, I can understand why people like this game, to an extent. It's just not for me. I think this game could have been great if they did a few things. First of all, a better lead. I couldn't stand Tidus' voice, and as a character, I found him to be rather shallow. A simple rewrite and a different voice could have fixed that. Second, a different secondary antagonist. Seymour sucks so much. He feels like a Kingdom Hearts villain that ended up in the wrong game. I like the idea of a corrupt religious leader being a villain within this game's story. Honestly, Micah probably would have been a better fit. He's already Spear's version of the Pope, but blue-haired Pegasus needs to go. And third, a traditional world map. I don't like having my freedoms restricted because the map designer thinks I want to look at his pretty fucking grass. Change those things with a few minor plot changes and I think I would have loved Final Fantasy X, but because the majority of the game was annoying and sluggish, I just couldn't get into it. Objectively, I think Final Fantasy X is a solid 7 out of 10, but for me personally, it's a 5 out of 10. It's a game that I would much rather watch than play. What do you think, JillieFoo?
I really wanted to love this game, and on an objective level, I can't say that it is terrible exactly, because it does have some great components in it. I found myself enjoying the game on some occasions. One day I played for 6 straight hours, but I stopped due to an unfair boss fight that I kept dying at. This wasn't the Unalesca fight just yet, but there are multiple fights that are more or less unfair without warning, or just long for the sake of padding out the game. This made me stop playing the game for a month. Instead, I picked up playing Persona 3, and that game was so far superior that it made me not even want to play Final Fantasy X because Persona was so much more fun. And some days I hit an immediate roadblock. The Unalesca fight, for example, made me so frustrated, Ranting Spider-Man got a million messages of me venting at him. Points like this in the game made me feel like I wasn't losing because I messed up, but because the game didn't present its random set of circumstances properly. When the game genuinely makes you feel like it's not your fault that you're losing, but the game's fault, it stops being fun and feels unfair. After being done with this game, I decided to play Bloodborne for the first time, mainly to see if I got angry at a game designed to be difficult versus a game that just isn't fair, and honestly, I had a far better time. Yeah, I'd die in Bloodborne, but only ever felt like it was because I needed to get better, not because of the restrictions of the game. These are the reasons why I, myself, wouldn't recommend Final Fantasy X to someone expecting an RPG that you can just sit back and enjoy. You will have to be willing to commit to the grind and be determined to push through the game's oddly paced story, uninteresting characters, and simplistic, lazy level design. If you want minimalistic level and world design, Persona 3 made 6 years later is better. Persona 3 arguably has an even more simplistic level and world layout, but the world is so interesting that it's not that big a deal, and the environments were far more atmospheric than Final Fantasy X's. I suppose it's unfair to compare it to a slightly newer game, but it just proves that certain simple visual and quality life changes would have made the game more bearable. The only thing I absolutely salute the game for is its music. Just as Ranting Spider-Man said, some tracks are droning and boring, but the songs that stand out truly stand out and get stuck in your head. To Xanarkand is a very memorable theme, and it fits the game's world, but it has so much more that pulls it down. Now you folks know me, I don't really do number ratings, so if you're looking for a game that is for the more hardcore that views side quests and high encounter rates as a challenge, and are fine with lackluster characters and world building, then I think you'd have a lot to enjoy here. There are a lot of battles, a lot of challenge, and a fun combat system that's complemented by great music. But if you really want a deep story that will blow your mind with its revelations and character development with some decent combat sprinkled in, then I don't really think this would be what you're looking for. For me personally, man, am I glad this is over with.
So what do we do now?
Want to start an all-girl J-pop band?
What?
What can I do for you?
We shall know one of this!